people in human history. Can one person truly change the direction of human history? Most people live within the world they inherit. They accept its languages, customs, political systems, technologies, and beliefs. But occasionally, an individual appears whose ideas or actions enter the world so deeply that generations born centuries later continue to feel the consequences. Some transformed religion, some changed science, some created empires, others developed systems of thought that influence education, government, morality, and daily life across entire civilizations. A printer in 15th century Europe had accelerated the movement of information. A naturalist in 19th century Britain transformed humanity's understanding of life. A philosopher in ancient Greece created categories of thought that remain influential for more than 2,000 years. A teacher in ancient China shaped family relationships, education, and government across East Asia. And several religious teachers inspired traditions followed by hundreds of millions or even billions of people. Their influence is often invisible because it has become part of ordinary life. The way schools are organized, the way laws are discussed, the way people understand morality, the way scientists study nature, the way societies record and distribute knowledge. Even the calendar used across much of the world reflects the influence of historical religious traditions. But influence is not the same as greatness. Some highly influential people cause enormous destruction. Some build systems through violence. Some were celebrated by one society and feared by another. Others left ideas that would later change, min- misinter- misinterpreted, or used for purpose they may never have intended. These videos do not attempt to identify the 10 best human beings in history. It examines 10 individuals whose actions, teachings, or discoveries produce unusual wide and lasting effects. Our ranking considers four main questions. How many people were affected? How long did the influence continue? How many areas of life were changed? And would history have developed differently without that and would history have developed differently without that individual? This is not a scientific or universally accepted ranking. Any list of this kind would be debated. Important figures such as Plato, Galileo, Martin Luther, Napoleon, Leonardo da Vinci, Karl Marx, Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Ashoka, and many others could reasonably have been included. But the 10 people in this countdown each transform human civilization on an extraordinary scale. Who will take the number one position? Let's begin. How influence is measured. Before beginning the countdown, we should clarify what the word influential means. The first factor is scale. Does the person influence a small community, one country, or several civilizations? The second factor is duration. Some people dominate the world during their lifetime but are quickly forgotten. Others leave ideas that remain powerful for centuries. The third factor is depth. Influence becomes greater when it changes not only one event but many areas of life, including education, law, science, politics, culture, and personal behavior. Finally, we consider historical consequences. Would the world have developed in a noticeable different way without this person? With these principles in mind, we begin with a ruler whose conquest transformed the ancient world. Number 10. Alexander the Great. At number 10 is Alexander the Great. Alexander became the king of Macedonia in the 4th century BCE and launched a series of military campaigns that destroyed the Persian Empire and carried his forces as far as Egypt, Central Asia, and the northwestern regions of the Indian subcontinent. He died at only 32 years old. That in little more than a decade, he changed the political and cultural map of the Asian world. Alexander inherited a powerful military system developed by his father, Philip II. He combined disciplined infantry, cavalry, engineering, and personal leadership to defeat forces that often appeared much larger than his own. His victories made him one of the history's most famous military commanders, but in his long-term influence was not based only on battle. Alexander's conquest accelerated the spread of Greek language, architecture, political ideas, and artistic traditions across a vast region. After his death, his regions divided the empire into several kingdoms. These states, these states continued to mix Greek culture with Egyptian, Persian, Central Asian, and other local traditions. This period became known as the Hellenistic Age. Greek became an important language of government, commerce, and intellectual life across much of the Eastern Mediterranean and Near East. Cities developed new libraries, schools, and artistic centers. Alexandria in Egypt became one of the most important centers of knowledge in this ancient world. Alexander didn't Alexander did not personally create every aspect of this culture, but his conquest created the political conditions that allow it to spread. His legacy was also complicated. Ancient and modern accounts frequently celebrate his courage and ambition, but his campaigns caused destruction, displacement, and mass death. Cities has resisted him could face severe punishment. His invention was liberation to some communities and catastrophe to others. This tension is essential to understanding influence. A person can reshape history without improving the lives of everyone affected. The cultural world created after Alexander later influenced the Roman Empire. Greek philosophy, literature, and language also shaped Jewish, Christian, and Islamic intellectual traditions. The New Testament, for example, was written in Greek within a world deeply affected by Hellenistic culture. Alexander's empire did not survive as a united political structure, but but the cultural connections created by his campaigns continued for centuries. That is why Alexander the Great begins our countdown. His military empire was believed, its cultural consequences were not. Our next fingers also created an enormous empire, but his descendants would connect distant regions of Eurasia on a scale the world had never seen before. Number 9. Genghis Khan. At number 9 is Genghis Khan, born as born as Temujin in the 12th century. He emerged from the difficult political environment of the Mongolian steppe. The region was divided among tribes and competing alliances. Through warfare, negotiation, and personal authority, Temujin gradually united many of these groups. In 1206, he was recognized as Genghis Khan, ruler of a new Mongol political order. The military system he created was fast, disciplined, and highly adaptable. Mongol forces relied heavily on skilled mountain archers who could travel extraordinary distances. Units were organized systematically, and commanders were often promoted according to ability and loyalty rather than only family background. The Mongols gathered intelligence, learned from defeated enemies, and adopt useful technologies. These qualities allowed them to defeat kingdoms far larger and wealthier than their own society. By the time of Genghis Khan's death in 1227, Mongol power extended across an enormous part of Eurasia. His descendants continued the expansion, eventually creating the largest contiguous land empire in history. The consequences was devastating. Cities were destroyed, populations were killed or displaced. Fear became deliberated military weapon. For many communities, the Mongol conquest represented one of the most traumatic periods in their history. Their Mongol influence was not limited to destruction. Once large territories were brought under related Mongol governments, trade and communication across Eurasia became easier in certain periods. Merchants, diplomats, technologies, artistic styles, and scientific knowledge traveled between regions. The movement of people connected China, the Islamic world, Central Asia, and Europe more directly. Papermaking, military technologies, medical knowledge, and geography information circulated across these networks. The empire also transformed political history. Mongol successor states influenced China, Russia, Central Asia, Persia, and the Middle East for generations. In China, Genghis Khan's, Genghis Khan's descendants established the Yuan dynasty. In the lands of the former Rus, Mongol power influenced taxation, political relationships, and the development of regional states. Genghis Khan remains a deeply contested figure. In Mongolia, he is often treated as a symbol of national unity and state formation. Elsewhere, he is remembered as a conqueror associated with destruction on an enormous scale. Both images reflect parts of his legacy. His influence came from building a political and military system that survived him and connected distant societies through conquest. He did not simply win battles. He changed the movement of power, people, and information across Eurasia. The, that places Genghis Khan at number 9. The next person, the next person did not command a, the next person did not command armies. His influence comes from making it possible for ideas to travel faster than ever before. Number 8. Johannes Gutenberg. Number 8 is Johannes Gutenberg. Gutenberg did not invent paper, writing, or the original concept of movable type. Printing technologies had existed in East Asia long before his lifetime. Chinese and Korean innovators made essential contributions to the history of printing. Gutenberg's importance lies in developing a practical system of mechanical printing with movable metal type for the conditions of 15th century Europe. His system combined several technologies. Movable metal letters could be arranged, inked, pressed onto paper, and then reused. A screw-based press provided consistent pressure. Specialized ink adhered effectively to metal type. Together, these elements allow many copies of a text to be produced more quickly and consistently than manuscripts copied by hand. Before printing spread, books was extremely expensive and slow to reproduce. A trained copyist might spend months creating a single manuscript. Errors could appear as texts were copied repeatedly. Large libraries existed, but access to books remained limited. Printing changed the economics of information. Publishers could produce many similar copies and distribute them to different towns and countries. Books did not immediately become affordable to everyone, but the direction of history had changed. Printing supported the expansion of literacy and education. It helped scholars compare texts and communicate new findings. Maps, diagrams, and scientific observations could be reproduced with greater consistency. Religious debates spread beyond local communities. Political authorities discovered that ideas could travel faster than censorship. The Renaissance, Protestant Reformation, and scientific revolution were not caused by Gutenberg alone, but printing accelerated each of them. The press also changed the relationship between language and identity. Publisher printed text in local languages rather than on, rather than only Latin. This helped standardize spelling and grammar and expanded access to literature. Over time, print books, newspapers, pamphlets created larger reading publics. The modern world of mass communication began to emerge. Gutenberg himself did not become enormously wealthy from the transformation. His business faced financial difficulties, and parts of his work were continued by others. This is another pattern in history. The people who create revolutionary technologies do not always control their long term consequences. Modern digital communication is very different from metal type, that the fundamental idea remains connected. Information can be copied and shared with large audience. Gutenberg's press have Gutenberg's press have turned knowledge from a scarce physical object into something that could circulate on a much wider scale. That information revolution earns him the number 8 position. Our next figure changed not how knowledge was distributed, but how humanity understood life itself. Number 7. Charles Darwin. And number 7 is Charles Darwin. Before Darwin, many people already recognized that living organisms could vary and that the natural world had changed over time. Other thinkers had proposed evolutionary ideas. Darwin's major contribution was to explain the powerful mechanism through which evolutionary change could occur: natural selection. Alfred Russel Wallace independently developed a closely related idea, and the two were jointly credited when their work was presented in 1858. Darwin later provided a far more extensive argument on the origin of species, published in 1859. The idea can be described simply. Individuals within a population are not identical. Some variations affect survival and reproduction. When those traits are inherited, individuals individuals with advantageous characteristics may leave more descendants. Across many generations, populations change. This process did not plan for a final goal. It, it emerges from variation, inheritance, and environmental pressure. Darwin's theory transformed biology. It offered a unifying explanation for the diversity of life. Anatomy, fossils, geography distribution, and reproduction could be studied as part of a connected historical process. Species were not entirely separate creations. They share, they share ancestry and change over time. This altered humanity's understanding of its own position in nature. Humans were not biologically isolated from other living organisms. They were part of the same evolutionary history. The, re- the reaction was enormous. Darwin's work entered scientific, religious, and public debate. Some accepted evolutionary ideas quickly, others strongly opposed them. The discussion has continued in various forms into the modern era. Evolution by natural selection became one of the foundation, foundational principles of contemporary biology. It influences genetics, ecology, medicine, agriculture, and the study of disease. Understanding the evolution of bacteria and viruses, for example, is essential when studying antibiotic resistance and emerging infections. Darwin's legacy also includes misuse. Ideas described as social Darwinism attempt attempted to apply simplified interpretations of biological competition to human societies. Such claims were used to justify imperialism, racism, inequality, and eugenics. These political ideologies should not be confused with the scientific theory of evolution by natural selection. They demonstrate how influential ideas can be distorted once they enter wider society. Darwin did not answer every question. He lacked modern knowledge of genetics and DNA. Later scientists expanded and corrected aspects of his work, but the central evolutionary framework remained extraordinarily powerful. Darwin trained biology from the study of fixed forms into the study of historical relationships and changing populations. From altering humanity's understanding of life, Charles Darwin takes number 7. The next person helped create a mathematical description of the physical universe. Number 6. Isaac Newton. And number 6 is Isaac Newton. Newton was not the first person to study motion, mathematics, astronomy, or light. He worked within the scientific revolution already shaped by figures such as Copernicus, Kepler, Galileo, and Descartes. But Newton brought major ideas together into a system with extraordinary explanatory power. His three laws of motion describe how objects respond to forces. His theory of universal gravitation proposed that the same physical principle affecting objects on Earth also governs the motion of moon and planets. This was a profound intellectual transformation. The heavens and the earth were not controlled by entirely separate kinds of physics. They could be studied through common mathematical laws. Newton's Principia Mathematica, published in the 17th century, became one of the most important works in history of science. It allowed, researchers to calculate and predict motion with unprecedented precision. The system influenced astronomy, engineering, navigation, and eventually industrial technology. Bridges, machines, artillery, spacecraft, and countless mechanical systems were later designed using principles developed from classical mechanics. Newton also made major contributions to mathematics. He developed methods He developed methods associated with calculus, although the history involves a famous priority dispute with German mathematician Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, who developed his own notation and approach. Calculus became essential for describing change, motion, growth, and physical systems. Modern engineering and science would be almost unimaginable without it. Newton's studies applied were equally important. Using, using prisms, he demonstrated that white light contains a spectrum of colors. He investigated reflection and built a practical reflecting telescope. His influence extended beyond individual discoveries. Newton had established an image of the universe as an order system governed by mathematical laws. This encouraged generations of scientists and Enlightenment thinkers to search for rational principles in nature and society. However, the popular image of Newton as a fully modern scientist is incomplete. He also, he also devoted enormous attention to theology, biblical, chronological, and alchemy. The boundaries between science, religion, and other forms of inquiry were different in his period. Newtonian physics was eventually expanded and partly revised. Einstein's rel- relativity became necessary for extreme speeds and strong gravitational fields. Quantum mechanics describe phenomena at very small scales, but Newton's system remains highly accurate for many ordinary situations. Students, engineers, and scientists still use it every day. Newton's achievement was not that he completed physics, it was that he demonstrated how a small set of, of mathematical principles could explain an enormous range of natural events. That vision transformed modern science and earns Isaac Newton in the number 6 position. Our next individual attempted to organize almost every major field of knowledge available in his time. Number 5. Aristotle. At number 5 is Aristotle. Born in the 4th century BCE, Aristotle studied at Plato Academy in Athens before developing his own school, known as the Lyceum. His interests covered an extraordinary range of subjects: logic, ethics, politics, biology, physics, metaphysics, psycho, rhetoric, poetry, government, and the nature of knowledge itself. Aristotle's influence came partly from his desire to classify and analyze. He did not simply ask what people believe. He asked how arguments work, how living things differ, and how political communities could be studied systematically. His writing created categories and questions that shaped intellectual life for centuries. In logic, Aristotle developed formal approaches to reasoning. His analysis of syllogisms influenced how scholars evaluated arguments. Although modern logic later moved far beyond his system, Aristotelian logic dominated many educational traditions for more than 2,000 years. In ethics, Aristotle asked what it means to live well. He emphasized character, habit, and the development of virtues rather than treating morality only as obedience to rules. His concept of virtue ethics remains influential in contemporary philosophy. In politics, he compared different systems of government and examined how constitutions could succeed or fail. Some of his conclusions reflected the inequalities and assumptions of ancient Greek society. He defended ideas about hier- hierarchy and slavery that are unacceptable today. Influence does not make every belief correct. Aristotle's works later become central to intellectual traditions far beyond ancient Greece. Scholars in the Islamic world translated, preserved, and commented on his writings. Thinkers such as Avicenna and Averroes developed major philo- philosophical systems through engagement with Aristotle. His work later shaped medieval Christian scholarship, especially to Thomas Aquinas. For centuries, Aristotle was frequently referred to simply as the, the, the philosopher. His authority became so great that it could sometimes slow progress. Some later scholars treated his conclusions as facts rather than hypotheses to be questioned. Early modern science advanced partly by challenging Aristotelian physics and natural philosophy. But even the act of disagreeing with Aristotle demonstrates his influence. He had defined many of the questions. Today, researchers no longer accept many of Aristotle's scientific claims that his methods of classification, argument, and systematic inquiry have shaped the structure of education. Modern universities divide knowledge into disciplines that still resemble areas he explored. Aristotle takes number 5 because he did not merely contribute to one subject. He helped create the intellectual framework to which generations organize knowledge itself. The next teacher shaped family life, education, and government across much of East Asia. Number 4. Confucius. Number 4 is Confucius. Confucius lived in ancient China during a period of political fragmentation and social instability. He did not rule an empire or command a large army. His influence came through teaching. He asked how individuals should behave, how families should function, and how leaders could create an orderly society. Confucian thought emphasized moral cultivation. A good society, in this view, could not be created only through punishment and force. Leaders should develop virtue and provide an example for others. Individuals should learn self discipline, respect relationships, and fulfill responsibilities associated with their social roles. Education was central. People could improve themselves through study, reflection, and practice. Confucius placed great importance on relationships between parents and children, rulers and subjects, older and younger people, friends and members of a community. The concept often translated as filial piety emphasized respect and responsibility toward parents and ancestors. Rituals were also important, not merely as empathy ceremonies, but as practices that train behavior and express social order. Confucius did not leave one complete book written personally in the modern sense. His teachings were transmitted through followers and later compiled, especially in the Analects. Over time, later thinkers developed different versions of Confucian philosophy. The influence became especially powerful when Confucian learning entered government and education. For long periods of Chinese history, knowledge of classical texts became essential for officials. Examination systems helped select numbers of bureaucracy. Although these systems were never perfectly equal, they reinforced the belief that education and demonstrated learning were important qualifications for government service. Confucian traditions also spread beyond China. They shaped Korea, Japan, Vietnam, and other East Asian societies. Their influence can be seen in education, family expectations, respect for scholarship, and ideas about social harmony. The legacy is not entirely positive or uniform. Confucian social systems has sometimes been criticized for reinforcing hierarchy, patriarchy, and excessive obedience. Modern reformers have debated whether Confucianism supports social stability or limits individual freedom. Different communities interpret the tradition in very different ways. That few teachers have influenced everyday conduct across so many generations. Confucius shaped not only philosophy but also schools, examinations, family duties, and political ideas. His teachings became part of the cultural foundation of a large part of Asia. That extraordinary combination of depth and duration placed Confucius at number 4. The top three fingers created religious traditions that transformed civilizations and continue to guide the lives of vast populations today. Number 3. Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. At, the, at number 3 is Siddhartha Gautama, known as the Buddha. The exact historical details of his life remain debated. He is generally understood to have lived in ancient South Asia during the first millennium BCE. Tradition describes him as a man who confronted the problems of aging, illness, death, and human dissatisfaction. After a long spiritual search, he attained awakening and began teaching a path toward liberation from suffering. The Buddha's teaching began with a diagnosis of the human condition. Life contains suffering, dissatisfaction, and instability. These experiences are connected to craving, attachment, and misunderstanding. Liberation comes possible through ethical conduct, mental discipline, and wisdom. The Buddhist path encouraged people to examine experience directly rather than relying only on social status or ritual. The Buddha established a community of followers. Monastic traditions have preserved and transmitted his teachings. After his death, Buddhism developed into multiple schools with different scriptures, philosophies, rituals, and artistic forms. There is no single Buddhist culture. Theravada tradition became influential in parts of South and Southeast Asia. Mahayana traditions spread through Central and East Asia. Vajrayana traditions became important in Tibet, Mongolia, and Himalayan regions. Buddhism influenced far more than personal spirituality. It shaped art, architecture, literature, philosophy, education, and political authority. Monasteries became centers of learning. Pilgrims, pilgrims, translators, and merchants carried texts across long distances. As Buddhism entered new societies, it interacted with local traditions. In China, it encountered Confucian and Taoist ideas. In Japan, it developed alongside Shinto practices. Across Southeast Asia, Buddhist kingship influenced political culture. The Buddha's influence also extends into modern world. Meditation practices inspired by Buddhist traditions have entered psychology, healthcare, and popular culture. However, modern adaptations sometimes remove the ethical and philosophical context of the original traditions. A mindfulness exercise used for stress reduction is not identical to the complete Buddhist path. The history also contains political conflict and institutional inequality. Buddhist societies, like all human societies, have not always embodied the ideals of compassion and nonviolence associated with the tradition. Nevertheless, the Buddha's central questions remain universal. Why do, why do human beings suffer? Why are we why are we dissatisfied when even when circumstances improve? Can the mind be trained? Can compassion be trained deliberate way of living? For roughly 2.5 millennia, people people across numerous cultures have organized their lives around responses attributed to one teacher. That skill and endurance placed the Buddha at the number 3. Our next figure became a religious teacher, political leader, and model of conduct for global civilization. Number 2. The Prophet Muhammad. Our number 2 is the Prophet Muhammad. Our respect for Islamic traditions that avoid visual representations of Muhammad. This section will use landscapes, manuscripts, calligraphy, and historical signs rather than portraying him directly. Muhammad was born in Arabia in the 6th century CE. According to Islamic belief, he received revelations from God and that were later preserved in the Quran. His message emphasized the oneness of God, moral responsibility, charity, justice, prayer, and accountability in afterlife. Muhammad began preaching in Mecca, where his message challenged existing religious practices and social relationships. He and his followers faced opposition. In 622 CE, the Muslim community migrated to Yathrib, later known as Medina. This event, the Hijrah, became so important that it marks the beginning of the Islamic calendar. In Medina, Muhammad became not only a religious teacher but also a community leader, judge, and political authority. By the time of his death in 632, much of Arabia had become connected to the new Muslim community. In the following centuries, Islamic states expanded across the Middle East, North Africa, Central Asia, and parts of Europe and South Asia. The speed of this political expansion was remarkable, but Muhammad's deeper influence came through religion, law, culture, and daily practice. Muslims regard Quran as divine revelation. Muhammad's sayings and reported actions, preserved through hadith traditions, became major sources for religious and legal thought. His example, known as the Sunnah, influenced prayer, family life, charity, commerce, and personal conduct. Islamic civilization later produced important achievements in mathematics, medicine, astronomy, architecture, philosophy, and literature. These developments were created by many people across many centuries, not by Muhammad personally, but they emerged within a civilization whose foundation was inseparable, inseparable from his message and leadership. Arabic became a major language of religion, government, and scholarship. Networks and privilegement and trade connected distant Muslim societies. Muhammad's legacy, like that of every world-changing leader, had also been interpreted differently across history. Muslims regard him as the final prophet and an example of faith and conduct. Historians study him as both a religious founder and a political leader. Non-Muslim societies have sometimes represented him through hostile stereotypes, while internal Muslim traditions contain diverse legal, theological, and cultural interpretations. Today, Islam is one of the world's largest religious traditions. Its daily prayers, calendar, festivals, ethical system, and institutions influence communities across every inhabited continent. Few individuals have united spiritual teaching, social organization, and political transformation so directly. For that reason, the Prophet Muhammad takes the number two position. Only one finger remains. His public life was brief. He commanded no army, and he left no writings known to have been produced by his own hand. That a movement centered on his life and teachings become one of the most influential forces in world history. Number one, Jesus of Nazareth. At number one is Jesus of Nazareth. Jesus was a Jewish teacher who lived in the Roman-controlled region of Judea and Galilee during the 1st century CE. Historical sources about his life are limited and shaped strongly by religious purposes. Most historians nevertheless accept that he existed, taught followers, and was crucified under Roman authority. Christian faith makes rational theological claims about his identity, death, resurrection. This video distinguishes between historical influence and religious belief while treating both with respect. Jesus taught about the kingdom of God, repentance, forgiveness, compassion, and moral responsibility. Stories attributed him to emphasize care for the poor, love of neighbor, and even love of enemies. He often taught through parables, short narratives, and challenged listeners to consider justice, mercy, and human behavior. His ministry lasted for only a few years. He did not control a government, he did not command a military force. He was executed through crucifixion, a Roman punishment associated with humiliation and political control. Under ordinary circumstances, his movement might have disappeared. Instead, his followers proclaimed that he had risen from the dead and was promised Messiah. Missionaries carried the message through the Roman world. Paul and other early Christian leaders played major roles in developing Christian communities beyond Judaism. Texts concerning Jesus were copied, interpreted, and eventually gathered into the New Testament. Over several centuries, Christianity moved from a persecuted mi- minority movement to an official supported religion within the Roman Empire. The consequences extended across politics, philosophy, art, and law. Christian institutions shaped medieval Europe. Churches became centers of worship, education, charity, and political authority. Christian theology interacted with Greek philosophy and Roman government. The religion later spread through missionary activity, migration, empire, and colonization. This history produced acts of compassion and education, but also coercion, violence, and persecution. Jesus' influence cannot be separated from what later institutions did in his name. Christian communities established hospitals, schools, universities, and charitable organizations. Movements from abolition, civil rights, and social reform frequently use Christian moral arguments. At the same time, rulers and institutions also invoke Christianity to justify welfare, forced conversion, anti Semitism, colonial expansion, and social hierarchy. The same tradition could inspire both liberation and oppression. This demonstrates the difference between a teacher's message and the many ways later societies interpret it. Jesus also influenced cultures beyond formal Christianity. His life appears in Islam, where he is honored as a prophet and Messiah. Through Islamic teaching reject central Christian claims about his divinity. His ethical teachings are discussed by secular philosophers and political leaders. Artistic images of Jesus have appeared in painting, sculpture, music, literature, and film across numerous cultures. The global calendar traditionally labels years in relation to his estimated birth, although modern scholarship recognizes uncertainty about the exact dates. Today, Christian traditions include Catholic, Orthodox, Protestant, and many other communities. They disagree on theology, authorship, worship, and social issues that will center their identity in some way on Jesus. Billions of people have lived within societies shaped directly or indirectly by beliefs concerning him. His influence reaches personal morality, family customs, holidays, architecture, education, music, political language, and concepts of charity and human dignity. Why does Jesus take the number one position? Not because every person follows him, not because all historical consequences connected to Christianity were positive, and not because historical influence proves theological claims. He takes the position because a short teaching ministry in a small part of the Roman Empire produced a movement that transformed civilizations for nearly 2,000 years. Few individuals have affected so many people across so many regions for such a long period. The combination of scale, duration, and depth makes Jesus of Nazareth the most influential person in the editorial ranking. Comparing the top 10. These 10 individuals influence humanity in very different ways. Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan transformed history through conquest. Their empires changed borders, trade routes, and cultural exchange, but their achievements came with enormous human suffering. Johannes Gutenberg increased the speed at which information could circulate. His printing system helped ideas reach audiences, and handwritten manuscripts could never serve efficiently. Charles Darwin changed biology by explaining evolution through natural selection. Isaac Newton demonstrated how mathematical laws could describe motion and gravity. Together, their work transformed humanity's understanding of life and the physical universe. Aristotle organized knowledge and created questions that shaped philosophy, science, and education across multiple civilizations. Confucius influenced family relationships, schooling, and government throughout East Asia. The final fingers created or inspired global religious traditions. The Buddha offered a path central on understanding suffering and training the mind. Muhammad united religious teaching with the development of a new community and civilization. Jesus became the central finger of Christianity, a tradition that transformed societies across much of the world. No ranking can measure these influences perfectly. How should military conquest be compared with philosophy? How should a scientific theory be compared with a religion? Should harmful influence count as strongly as beneficial influence? Different viewers will reach different conclusions. A ranking created in another cultural tradition might include different individuals or arrange them differently. This disagreement is not a weakness, it is a part of the subject. Influence is not simple number, it is a network of consequences extending through time. People who could have been included. Many important individuals did not appear in this countdown. Plato profoundly shaped philosophy. Ashoka had Buddhism spread beyond its early communities. Qin Shi Huang unified China under an imperial system. Augustus established political structures that shaped the Roman Empire. Martin Luther transformed Western Christianity. Karl Marx influenced politics and economics across the modern world. Albert Einstein changed modern physics. Mercury transformed research into radioactivity and became a powerful symbol for women in science. Mahatma Gandhi influenced nonviolent political movements, and countless inventors, writers, reformers, and leaders changed history without receiving equal recognition. The past is never created by only 10 people. Even the individuals in this list depend on followers, teachers, workers, translators, soldiers, institutions, and communities. History often remembers one name while forgetting the thousands who made that influence possible. Conclusion: human history is shaped by systems, environment, and large community. But individuals can still matter. One person can express an idea right at the right moment. One teacher can create a tradition. One invention can change communication. One scientific explanation can transform how humanity understands the universe. And one conqueror can redirect the lives of millions. The influence of Alexander and Genghis Khan reminds us that power can reshape the world through force. Gutenberg demonstrates the power of information. Darwin and Newton show the power of scientific explanation. Aristotle and Confucius reveal how ideas can structure education and society. The Buddha, Muhammad, and Jesus demonstrate how religious teachings can cross languages, cultures, and centuries. Their legacies are not simple. Each has been celebrated, debated, expanded, and sometimes misused. But influence does not require simplicity. It means that the world after a person is different from the world before them. Now, we would like to hear from you. Who do you believe is the most influential person in human history? Do you agree with the number one position? Which individual should have been included in this countdown? Share your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey through ideas, discoveries, and lives that shape humanity, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more documentaries about history, science, civilization, and the people who change the world. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next video.